Let me get to our phone lines because I should have, and I believe I have, the Sinn Féin leader, Gerry Adams, by phone. Gerry, good morning. Thank you. You can hear me all right now, Gerry?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Listen, you must be somewhat buoyed up by the Red C poll over the weekend that shows Sinn Féin up 3% to 20%, while at the same time Fine Gael are down, no change at Labour, and Fianna Fáil, no change as well. How do you feel about that?
Well, I was at a Sinn Féin meeting, reviewing our progress in the election when that poll came through, and I said to my colleagues, ignore it.
Why?
Don't they? Because these are just little snapshots. Obviously, it'll be psychologically good for people on the ground, but generally speaking, I try to be consistent about opinion polls. You know, politicians will laud the ones that they favour and rubbish the ones that they don't. So we have to be consistent. Our job, it's very, very clear. This is the first time in my lifetime that there is a chance to elect a progressive government to end the domination of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. The people will have their say on the 26th. So our job is to keep focused, keep mobilising, keep motivating, try to get people to encourage them to come out, and because it's up to the people. The people will decide the outcome of this election. That's where our focus has to be, and we have to fight for every single vote, for every single preference, and hope that the people will do the right thing.
Let me ask you about the televised debates. The same question I asked Enda Kenny. Do you think that they have a role to play? Do you think that people's minds are made up by the performance of the leaders on the night?
Well, again, it's not a perfect science. Some people will be encouraged who have made their minds up. Some people will strengthen their commitment. Some people who haven't made their mind up may well have. There may be some moment in a debate which focuses them as well. So it's really hard to know. In all of this, I suppose the big thing that they do is that they bring it to everyone's attention.
But do you not think it annoys people? I mean, you described it the other night as being a Punch and Judy show that you didn't want to be part of. There was shouting, people are cutting across each other. Us, the viewers, could hardly hear what you guys were saying a lot of the time.
Well, when you're there, you never know just how it's working. But I do know from listening to the radio, we listen to the radio an awful lot. And when 3 or 4 people are arguing with each other, you can't make any sense of it at all. And sometimes the temptation, if you stay out of it, then you become irrelevant, and if you get into it, then you make the whole debate irrelevant. So it's the moderation of these debates is key important, and I have to say also it's very hard for a moderator to ensure that everybody acts in a mannerly way towards everybody else, and that ensures that everybody gets their fair amount of time. But they certainly, if you look at the viewership, there's certainly a huge amount of people tuning in, which is good because it shows people are interested.
Does it bother you that the party leaders, without fail, go after you, both professionally and personally?
Well, I made the point to them that they could learn a lot from Ian Paisley, or for that matter from Robinson. And, you know, the degree of invective, of personalised and sometimes quite vicious and untruthful commentary from the other leaders isn't matched in the north. You know, whatever about the reasons which unionists may have to be hostile towards Sinn Féin, I have to say that in all my dealings with them in more recent years, they've always been respectful, cordial, and so on. And also you find some of this is for the optics, because once the debate's over, Joan and Enda and Micheál all go back to being hello, how are you, and you know. So there's a bit of play acting goes on, a bit of performance.
People would feel very cynical about that then, because they would see these this play acting as just being hypocritical if it's not real.
Well, one of our folks said to me one time, I met so and so, and they asked me could I go and have a cup of coffee with them, and I thought to myself, well, sure, if they really believed all that they're saying about me, they wouldn't want to be going for a cup of coffee with me. So there is a degree of hypocrisy in it. But I discovered that when I came down A friend of mine told me that if you thought politics in the North was vicious, you haven't seen anything yet.
And you've learned that it's vicious in the South then?
Absolutely, yeah. That's career for some of the people involved.
Yeah, you've had a couple of foot and mouth moments, though. Talking about abolishing the special criminal courts was one, and Thomas Slab Murphy, the good Republican, was another. Would you agree?
Well, we have a long-standing position on the special criminal court.
No, I'm saying, do you regret bringing this up?
No, it was seized on the back of two very brutal murders. It was very opportunistic. It was a means of, particularly Fine Gael, taking the focus away from the fact that they had invented $2 billion to spend on a promise of putting that into public services, when we all know no intention of building proper public services. But when they started to cook the books to try and buy off or bribe a section of the electorate, this special criminal court issue became a distraction away from all of that. I've never heard Tom Murphy called Slab Murphy, just for the record. And I didn't raise the issue. I was asked questions and I answered the questions, which I always try to do. I don't consider those to be foot and mouth moments. They're not the most important thing in the election.
For people that may not know, Thomas Murphy, the good Republican, as you described him, was found guilty of tax fraud. He defrauded the Irish state of hundreds of thousands of euro in owed taxes. He made no tax returns from 96 to 04. I mean, do you condone tax evasion?
No, I think everyone has to pay their taxes, whether they're multinationals, whether they're farmers, whether they're politicians. My issue around Tom Murphy, and he contests these charges, and he contests the amount that's involved. But my position around that was very, very straightforward, that he should have had, if it needed a trial by jury. Now, I'm minded of the time that Fine Gael, the political party, to make tax returns under Michael Noonan's leadership.
But that's entirely different. You're talking about a political party and a finance minister. Tom Murphy was a prominent member of the IRA. I mean, they found 250,000 euro in a barn. They found another 111,000 sterling. He made a cab settlement for 1.5 million. I mean, who paid that?
Well, he never made a cab settlement. See, there's a lot of nonsense about here. I'm not a spokesperson for Tom Murphy. Neil, but it is for a finance minister at that time, the leader of Fine Gael, not to have made tax returns.
But I ask you about Tom Murphy, and you talk to me about Michael Noonan.
I'm trying to show the comparison between one law for one person who is allegedly a breach and not making tax returns, and one law for somebody else.
When you spoke about the abolishing the special criminal courts, people accused you of wanting that because you had friends who were tried by it, including Martin McGuinness and Martin Ferris, both tried and convicted of IRA membership. So were the killers of Veronica Guerin, John Dundon in Limerick for killing the rugby player Shane Geoghegan. That's why I say to you, you would have been better off staying out of that.
Well, we are not a populist party. We do have a number of principles. One of those principles is that the cornerstone of any democratic system is the right to trial by a jury. That's part of the Good Friday Agreement. There are many other states in the world who have dealt with bigger problems than this one has, and has done so and resolved and tackled organised crime, but still retained the right of citizens to be tried by juries of their peers. And incidentally, if I may say this, Neil, that isn't what the heart of this crisis around crime. I mean, people are frightened about being in their own homes, particularly in people in rural areas. The Gardaí have had their numbers cut under successive governments. Fianna Fáil on this one by 3,500. Fianna Fáil closed the Tammore Training College. I know in my own constituency, and 2 Gardaí were killed recently in my own constituency, that some of the gangs are using highly mobile vehicles, while some of the guards are stuck on old jalopies. Now, you can't cut the Garda numbers the way this government and its predecessor did and not expect criminals to take advantage of it.
Yeah, but all the political parties at this stage are talking about recruiting new Gardaí. I know you talk about recruiting 3,000 new Gardaí, bringing it back to a total of maybe 14,250. But interestingly, you also talk about, is it true that you say you will reopen all of the closed rural Garda stations?
No, we don't say we'll reopen them. We'll say we'll reverse the policy, which has seen 140 closed. Can't reopen them all. Some have been sold off. Some have been closed or demolished and so on. But
so you would do nothing about rural crime then, about putting more Gardaí back into the communities?
No, we will. We believe in policing with the community. Our party was centrally involved in the transition of the old RUC in the north into the ASNI, and that is working well. So we know about policing with the community. We know about keeping police officers in pace with local needs and contact with local needs. The two Gardaí who were killed in my constituency were both bedded and committed to the communities in which the Gardaí do a wonderful job, but they need the resources to do it properly. We want to see guards on the beat. We want to see a situation where someone knows that when they're concerned that they can make a phone call and someone will be available to them. And, there's the big issue of organised criminality, with the drugs epidemic, which has been going on for a number of decades now. And then there's the more low-key but equally terrifying antisocial and burglaries that are going on in different parts, particularly in rural Ireland. And Garda on the beat, on the street, and destroyed values. And
so why don't you say that you will put back in rural Garda stations then?
Sorry, you're missing my point. I'm not explaining myself. We cannot replace precisely every Garda station which has been closed.
Why?
Because some of them have been sold off.
Well, you could get other properties and other premises.
Yes, of course, and that's part of that's when I use the word we will reverse that policy. That's what I mean. No,
you said you can't reopen them, and I'm saying I'm asking you why.
Sorry, Neil, we're just talking purposes to each other. We want to see local Garda stations available to people and open. I'm making the case simply as we cannot precisely reopen every single one that has been closed, but we want to see local Garda. We want to see local post offices. Same as we want to see local.
So are you going to open new post offices then?
Yes, if there's a community demand, yes.
Okay.
The social fabric of rural.
You see, here's my problem. Here's my problem. I think Sinn Féin tend to make things up as they go along. And while your sentiments might be fantastic, you're woolly on detail, and the devil's in the details. So here's my point. Sinn Féin are asking people to trust new unknown TDs in cabinet jobs. This would be men and women now with zero experience in the positions of responsibility they would hold. What would you say to that?
Well, let me answer your first charge first of all. We don't make it up as we go along. We did, and I was part of it, we did a big listening exercise with people in rural Ireland, with stakeholders, with rural dwellers, as well as people from the farming, from the health sector, and so on. And we brought forward a Defend Rural Ireland policy position. We then went on to do a similar exercise in the West, because we found that a lot of these problems, not least immigration.
No, I'm not disputing that you did the research. No, I'm not disputing any of that.
So we're very, very clear. There is a social dimension to what we are talking about. We are Republicans. That means that people have rights, and while it's a right to safety in their homes or in their communities, the right to a home itself, the right to hospital treatment, the right to a bus service or to a post office, the right to have happiness in their lives wherever they live, and we've brought forward, and also the right to a job.
But every person in the Republic could say that, but not every person in the Republic could actually be running the country. My point is that you're asking us to trust unknown TDs. Like Labour said, Sinn Féin will mismanage the Irish economy. It'll cost jobs. They make the comparison of Sinn Féin in government in Ireland like a left-wing party in Portugal that crippled the country in months, drove unemployment above 20%, and had their first budget rejected by the EU. My point to you is, wouldn't the same kind of thing happen under an unknown Sinn Féin coalition government or single-party government, for that matter, that you have no experience in the job?
Well, if we look at the mess Labour have made of it, it's a bit rich for them to be criticising anybody else. They were elected on a completely different mandate from the one which they have been implementing for the last 5 years.
They're creating 1,500 jobs a week at the moment.
Sorry.
They've got unemployment down to single figures.
I know you're only being provocative here, But
they're facts, Gerry.
Sorry?
They're facts.
No, the social damage that has been done, and we laud every single job that has been created. But the uplift in our economy is not through any actions of this government. It's through global factors. The decrease in oil prices, the differential between the different currencies, the easy availability of credit. Now, the fact of the situation is, we always said, and I was there for the last 5 years, you cannot cut your way out of recession. You have to grow your way out of recession. The social consequences of the budget which this government brought in were there for all to see. The fact of a homeless crisis is not an accident. It's because they wouldn't build social and affordable housing. The fact that we have a crisis within Garda Síochána is because they took the numbers in Garda Síochána. And don't miss the point, Neil, that on this government's watch, that a health minister was forced to resign, a Garda commissioner to retire, and the Taoiseach still give an adequate or a credible explanation.
But anybody, I understand that, but anybody who's any way kind of in business, right, or an entrepreneur or a small to medium-sized business, or thinking of investing in Ireland, would be quaking in their boots when they look at the Sinn Féin policies. You want to increase tax rates. I think you want to have a 59% tax rate for PAYE workers, a 62% tax rate for self-employed. You know that policy will have Ireland with the highest tax rate in Europe.
Neil, where do you get those figures?
Because when you add on the various taxes together, including USCs, you get a 62% rate for self-employed and a 59% top-rated tax for PAYE.
No worker earning under 100,000 will receive any tax increase.
But no, what about those over 100,000?
Yeah. Well, let me finish with the first point and correct the first point you made. And I'll repeat what I just said. No worker earning under 100,000 will have any tax increase. They will have more money in their pockets because we will get rid of water charges. We will get rid of the family home tax. We will bring in a range of other measures to reverse the stinking, miserable meat bird that cuts which this government brought in. Those earning over 100,000, we want to take 7 cents out of every euro that they earn above 100,000 on an individual basis. In other words, those who can't afford to pay most will pay most, and we will.
And what rate will that be?
Sorry,
what rate of tax would that be?
Well, for those on those on average, the marginal level will be below 30%. For those earning over 70%, the marginal rate will be under 50%, and for those who earn, and it's on every euro above 100,000.
Yeah.
So it will be 7 cents in.
No, what I'm asking you is, what will be their total tax percentage?
It would be 57%.
62%.
No, 50, well, on every, it's on every, it isn't.
So 67% upper tax rate will drive people out of Ireland, penalise risk takers, lead to a massive brain drain. What young person or entrepreneur would want to stay in Ireland if they knew that they'd be receiving less than 40% of their wages, Gerry?
Well, you see, what we will do is this, Neil, and this is important. We will have decent public services.
No, but it's like as if people who work hard are the pariah to you.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, if you remember back to the Celtic Tiger days, I made the case numerous times. Sinn Féin is not against wealth. There are some.
You're not against it. You just want to tax it to death.
No, bear with me. There are some people who really have get up and go, who are inventive, who have spirit, who can create wealth, and fair play to them. That we would to have the type of public services we want to see. We need a prosperous economy. We need a good, thriving economy. So we would encourage, particularly small and medium enterprises. We will bring tax equality for the self-employed who get an awful bad deal at the moment. And here's the big thing I find in my travels, and don't underestimate the number of people who have been driven out of the country. People of all levels are decent and they are patriotic. And they know it's wrong that as we do this interview, there are children in Cork and throughout this state who are hungry. that there are children who...
But if you drive businesses out of Ireland because of a draconian tax system, the people will never get jobs so that they won't be hungry and that they won't be homeless. I mean,
Neil,
you talk about You talk about mandatory trade union membership. All companies would have to recognise it. 3 out of 5 US companies in Ireland don't recognise trade unions.
Neil, we will not drive people out of the country. We encourage people in a new regenerated Ireland right across the entire
But if
island.
you say that all companies must recognise trade unions, loads of US companies will bail out. Ryanair pulled out of Copenhagen. Duns don't engage with trade unions.
Well, workers need rights. Somebody has to stand up for them. The big companies can't put all their own way with these zero-hour contracts and short-hour contracts where people can't even get any type of stability in terms of their income, where they can't get mortgages, where they can't invest because they don't have the money to invest. And there are a lot of people who are in work but who are stretched to have any quality of life. They're working simply to keep a roof over their heads, and some are working and can't keep a roof over their heads. So people have rights, and the big difference between us and these other parties is that as Republicans, we believe that the mark of a republic is in the citizenship of its people.
Let me ask you about that.
Sorry, in the modern age, that means that people have a right to a home, right to access to education, the right to whatever your ability or disability or where you live, the right to a decent quality of life.
Let me ask you about that in comparison to, decent quality of life in comparison to the other three parties. For instance, Fianna Fáil will increase the state pension by €30 over 5 years. Will you match or better that?
Well, we will stay away from the politics of the promises. I don't know anybody could believe anything that these...
No, they're saying that they will... I mean, it's a straightforward question. They will increase the state pension by €30 over the next government.
Well, I don't believe that they will do that because...
No, I'll ask you that. I mean, let's say that they will. What are you proposing?
Well, we are going to reverse all of the cuts, every single cut that has been made, which is breaking people's hearts, whether it's on prescription charges... I didn't ask you that.
Do you have any policy? You talk about people who are marginalised to increase the state pension.
Yeah, well, we will do our very, very best to relieve the burden on elderly people, and we will make sure.
You don't have a figure though. Fine Gael will increase the minimum wage from $9.15 to $10.50 over 5 years. Will you match or better that?
Well, Neil, if I can say so. Well, first of all, we will increase the minimum wage, but I think you're making a mistake, if I may say. So, will we match? People aren't out there looking at this as if this was a horse race. People are looking in the round of their lives and looking to see long-term stability in their lives. So, yes, people do need a living wage, do need a living pension, do need the security of a home.
I know that you've said that a few times, but you're critical of the other parties, but I'm telling you what they are saying they'll do. Labour will increase the minimum. Okay, you may not believe them, but this is what Labour will increase the minimum wage to $11.30 over 5 years.
I know, and what they said the last election. You know, what did Fianna Fáil say at the election before that? Anything we have put forward is, in a very forensic way, costed. We will use the bulk of whatever money is available to put it into public services and to put it into social protections for the elderly, for children with disabilities, for adults with disabilities, for access to education. We will...
But then I ask you about the elderly and you don't have any policy on the pension.
We do have a policy on pensions, and I've said very, very clearly that people need a living pension, but I just don't like the tone where we start, Fine Gael are promising to give an extra 50%, or an extra 50 cents, or an extra this, or an extra that. The fact is that these are the governments which fleeced, which shafted, which screwed the elderly.
I know that, but Joan Burton would say at least they were around for that. She says Sinn Féin don't understand the Irish state. They haven't been through the good times and the bad, not like Labour, Fine Gael or even Fianna Fáil. She says Sinn Féin are not proud of the Irish state and where we came from because you weren't around.
Well, I'm very proud of where we came from. But I'm very disappointed that the men and women of 1916, which is where we came from, that their vision, that the proclamation is not visible except in the spirit of the people. There's nothing in this statement. Did the men and women, does the proclamation say that, Irish men and Irish women, unless you have a disability, unless you live in rural Ireland, unless you're poor, It's all about equality. It's all about decency. It isn't about the elites. These parties who are trying, and people are too wise for them, who are trying to buy off sections of the vote, are the parties which award it themselves.
But you're trying to buy votes as well. You're talking about building 100,000 social houses. You're talking about abolishing upward-only rents. You're talking about a universal health system, free health cover from the cradle to the grave, including everyone, including the super rich, incidentally. Even Michael O'Leary would get free health.
And he'd pay more tax. And
that's true.
Let me come back to this issue, Neil, again, if I may, with you, right? There's a housing crisis. What we are pledging to do, and it is not an election promise, this is a plan that we will build. The government built 28 local authority social and affordable houses last year. We will build, over a period, through capital investment, social and affordable housing to deal with the crisis. I went to the government 100 times in the last 5 years, asking them to deal with the issue of those citizens who just can't afford the mortgage interest rate, who I put it to them numerous times to give the central bank the power to set caps on mortgage interest rates. They wouldn't do it.
Okay, so
I asked them 100 times to put rent certainty in place by linking it to rent increases, by linking rent increases to and inflation.
You would abolish upward-only rents. You'd build 100,000 social houses. You would create 250,000 new jobs. You would abolish third-level fees. That would mean college for everybody. Yeah, taxpayer pays for all that. However,
people have the right to access to education if there's their ambition or their desire. You yourself know you're an educated man. You know that.
But there's no point sending everybody to college if we're just exporting them afterwards.
That's what we're doing under this government. And I want to go back to the issue that you raised with me in terms of pensions and pensioners and what this government...
Why? Has somebody slipped you a note on it?
No, because what I tried to say to you earlier on, you wouldn't let me make.
No, I asked you for a figure.
Yes, because you have to look at our tax policies, which is about fair tax in the round.
Oh, I asked you about the pension and I asked you about the minimum wage, and I told you what the other parties will do. You don't have figures on pension or minimum wage increases. I moved on then.
Well, let me respond to that. If we have a mandate, the water charges, that will put €160 in the pocket of a person. If we have a mandate, the property tax, that will put €240 in the pocket of a person. If we cut back all of those miserable cuts from fuel allowance, through telephone allowances, through home help hours and so on and so forth, that will relieve a huge burden. And if we get a mandate to abolish prescription charges, all of that will increase the money going into the pockets of ordinary people, and those particularly who are senior citizens. And that is not an election promise, because that's what we said in the Dáil. That's what Pierce Doherty put it up to them when we forward alternative budgets over the last 5 years.
One of those is water charges. Will you refund money then to everybody who has already paid?
No, we can't do that. It's impossible to do that because the money isn't there. We have been very...
So are you encouraging people who haven't paid just yet not to pay?
Well, we have always had a position that, and this is again has been a consistent position, that we have never called upon anyone to pay.
No, I didn't ask you that. I'm saying those that haven't paid, me amongst them, should I pay or should I continue to withhold?
That's a matter for you. But sorry, you don't seem to be able to understand what I'm saying to you when I put these points to you. We have never encouraged anyone not to pay, but we have said that we will support those who don't pay. The uprising that happened over the last number of years, particularly around this water charge issue, I think shows the spirit of the people. Now, I know some people were pressed and were intimidated and were coerced into paying. We're going to scrap the water charge.
But that's not what I asked you. I asked you, those who haven't paid just yet, should they pay?
That's a matter for people themselves. I'm not going to pay. That's a matter for people themselves to
I'm conscious of time, and I appreciate you sticking with me on this. How can Irish people be expected to be... This is the only time that I get a chance to talk to you before the election. How can they be expected to be sure that you're the right man to take us into the future when many people aren't even sure of your past? Incidentally, You're leader now of the party 33 years, the longest in Irish political history. I'm kind of slow to use the word. It's almost like a dictatorship. Is it ego that keeps you there? Do you regard yourself as a liability? Did you ever think of falling upon your sword and letting Mary Lou lead the party forward?
Well, first of all, it's up to the party who leads them, and we have an election every year for the leader. And this isn't really about me. Like, if I had any sense, I would go and get a life. But I believe in what I'm doing. We are very lucky that we have a team, and I have been part of building that team, and if I have any qualities at all in terms of politics, it is about team building and being part of a team. We also have a peace process in the north, which cannot be ignored, which needs careful nourishing and nurturing. You know, if we'd listened to Fianna Fáil or to Fine Gael, to the Taoiseach or to the leader of Fianna Fáil, in the last number of months, they both advised that the institutions in the north should be suspended.
I'm talking. You go off topic, Gerry, and then you accuse me of not listening. I asked you about the Gerry factor. You mentioned Micheál Martin. He said in a Sunday Independent interview yesterday, of course Gerry Adams was in the IRA. He's not telling the truth on that.
Well, why doesn't he go to the Garda Síochána and report me?
I don't know. That's a question for him.
Well, when you get him on, ask him that.
Yeah.
Let me go back to explain to you why I'm still in the position that I'm in. Because had we listened to Micheál Martin to the north or to Enda Kenny, there wouldn't be institutions in place at this time. So it does need careful management, because we're working with the unions, we're working with the British government. We get very, very little help. This government doesn't have any affinity with the north at all. So I'm not going to be in this job forever. The party have chosen me to lead them. I'm going to put my name forward at our RDS again in April. At some point, the party will decide that it wants someone else to do the job. At the moment, the party is content that I do the job, and as long as my health allows me, I will do so.
But you attract criticism, though. I mean, bringing up, for instance, as I will now, the issue regarding your niece, Anya Adams, sexually abused by your brother Liam. There is the issue of you questioned for 4 days regarding the disappearance and the murder of Jean McConville. There is the issue of Maria Cahill, abused by her uncle, where you spoke about the fact that the IRA had kangaroo courts. All of this is real negative, isn't it? It attracts negativity around you.
I'm sure that whoever leads Sinn Féin, they will receive a negative response. The issue around my family is deeply personal, and I'm sure many of those people that are listening to your programme have experienced or who have been in a situation where a loved one has been abused, have been very, very traumatised by all of that. I did my best in that regard. I did my best in dealing with all of the other issues.
But did you? Your brother made a partial confession to you in 2000, but you didn't tell the police till 2009.
No, the police were told of this, and it's a matter of public record.
But Anya says you were more desperate about saving your political skin than helping her.
Well, let me go back. The IUC got a report about the abuse a way back, I think, in 1978 or 79. So they knew at that point. You knew
in 87, though.
Yes. And what's your point?
The feeling is that you didn't do enough early enough.
Well, I'm sorry. There were a number of inquiries into all of these issues, and whatever my political opponents might want to make of this, the outward of all of those inquiries was that I did nothing wrong. Okay. And God forbid, Neil, that you find an abuse situation in your own home. I just wish you well and trying to deal with it.
No, I understand that, and it's wrong of you to personalise it with me, Gerry.
You're personalising it with me.
I'm not. I'm talking about something that was on the record.
No, you're talking about a deeply wounding.
I understand
family situation for all involved.
I understand that, and there's no point trying to turn it around and trying to make me the enemy. I'm just dealing with things that you've taken fire for.
I'm answering the question. Don't be so. You expect me to sit here thick-skinned, listening to all of this, and when I simply wish you well, if unfortunately you have to deal with one of these situations, you get ultra-sensitive.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying you're personalising it against me, and you're the one that's running. I mean, you're the one that's running for government. I had wanted to make the point. I made the point about what Micheál Martin said. said. His wife, Mary Martin, in the same interview said there is a reluctance to support Sinn Féin because of the Gerry factor. She said what he did to his niece, anyone covering up anything to do with sex abuse, I don't think anyone would stand over it.
Well, I have never covered up anything to do with sex abuse. I dealt with all of this as best I could in very, very difficult circumstances. And that's, if we go back to the beginning of this interview, is the type of highly personalised, I have family. I have, they mightn't listen to this programme, but I have young family members who listen to these type of accusations being made. And there is a reluctance by our political opponents to deal with these issues in a fair way. They see an issue which they think can do damage, and they zero in on it without any thought at all of the consequences. Not for me, because I'm in this position. I'm in this position on a voluntary basis, so I'll put up with it. But all the other people involved.
It's personal then, and it hurts.
I said that in the Dáil. Stood up and said that in the Dáil. That there's, and given the amount of abuse that suffers in Irish society, and not just in institutions, most abuse happens in the home, and given the revelations, and given the failure on Fianna Fáil's watch to deal with deeply institutionalised abuse with the Magdalene Laundry women.
I know that, and I understand that things are personal to you, but I mean, and I don't mean to be unkind, and I do realise that it's personal. But, sometimes it can be easy to say it's personal when you talk about Jean McConville, or you talk about Anya, or you talk about Maria.
Well, then, Neil, let me bring you back to something. I have fought 2 elections in this state. The last election had all of these issues rehearsed fully, in detail, in every single programme I did, and all of my opponents raised all of these issues. It's now been rehearsed again.
Yeah.
Even though it's all a matter of history.
You say leave it in the past, it's history, move on.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
The good people of Louth then had a vote. And knowing all of these things, they chose me to represent them. So we have a mandate. Our political opponents will seize on these issues to try and score points. But people who live in the real world, people who rearing families, people who love their families as I love my family, people who are trying to make sure their loved ones and their youngsters have a place in the future, understand all of these matters. So they vote for our party, and they're going to vote for our party again, and they will judge the record of us in government in the north on what we do on the ground, on what we have done in terms of standing up to the British and Unionists in the north, but also trying to bring in alternatives in this state. And they will say, we've had Fianna Fáil, we've had Fine Gael, we've had Labour, this Sinn Féin, this Republican Party, which talks about citizens' rights, which has brought about citizens' rights to a large degree in the north. Is it not time to give them a chance?
Yeah, it is. Not if you're a risk taker, though. You want to get the first plane out of here.
Well, you see, immigration is not an accident. It is a policy option. All the figures that the government conjures up around different matters doesn't take into account the hundreds of thousands of young people mostly, and I meet them when I travel.
I understand that.
They're scattered throughout the globe.
And you want to bring back those who left. I understand that.
I did a meeting in the Taoiseach's own constituency in Mayo with the families of young people who are...
I understand that. My final point is that you want to be off your head to open a business under a Sinn Féin government if you're going to be taxed like that.
Well, you're not, because we will bring in fairness for the self-employed. We bring in fairness for the small and medium.
You're going to double the PRSI contribution of employers.
We are going to bring about tax fairness. The tax reliefs that are available, 80% of them are availed of by 20% at the very, very, very top.
No, my point is, are you going to double PRSI for SMEs?
We are going to bring in a cocktail of measures. We're going to get rid of upward-only rents.
I didn't ask you about upward. I asked you about doubling PRSI.
Please.
No, you please. I asked you about... What? No, I said, are you going to...
just for the sake of it.
I'm not being competitive. I asked you, are you going to double employers' PRSI for SMEs? And you went on about upward-only rents.
No, we are looking at this in the round. We have a very unfair, unequal tax system. small and medium enterprises will be better off under Sinn Féin. Self-employed workers will be better off under Sinn Féin. Workers earning below 100,000 will be better off under Sinn Féin, and everybody will have access. If we get a mandate, and it'll take maybe 10 years to do it all, but we'll at least have the availability of decent public services instead of what we have at the moment, notwithstanding the good work of the health workers. The fact is that people end up in hospital trolleys. There are huge waiting lists.
You're correct.
You know the story.
Okay.
You've covered it a million times.
Let's end on that positive note then, and wish you well for the next week to 10 days campaigning. Thank you, Gerry, as always.
Thank you, Nick.
Much obliged. Thank you for taking my call. Leader of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams.